Okay, so let's get started. Thank you all for joining today. This, as you know, is an APC member benefit provided exclusively for you. These are monthly Growing Together webinars that you can also find on our website following several days following after each webinar is concluded. We are fortunate today to have with us Amy Philpott. Amy is the founder and chief brand protector at Philpott PR Solutions in Washington, D.C. She has dedicated more than 20 years assisting companies and organizations throughout the supply chain to use traditional and digital communications to protect their brands, reputations, and business relationships in both domestic and foreign markets. You may have met Amy throughout her work with APC, most recently at Peanut Congress last month, where she provided a similar workshop on crisis communications. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Amy. Thanks, Amy, for being here.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. And thanks to the American Peanut Council for the opportunity. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and you would think, since we've all done this for many years now, it would go flawlessly. I'm hoping it does this time. Okay, so Tracy, can I ask you to confirm that you are looking at my title slide?
Yes, I see it perfectly.
Okay, thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here with everyone. I see quite a few names, not very many people on video, which is fine. I would like, though, if you're not going to be on video, if you could just take a quick minute to identify the reactions down at the bottom, you know, those little emojis, like you can put your hand up if you have a question or thumbs up. So as we go along, if you can express your thoughts through those, that would be great. It'll give me a little idea of how everyone is tracking. Also, if you are at a computer and you have your phone, believe it or not, I'm going to ask you to actually use your phone during a presentation. I know normally the instructions are the opposite, right? You're supposed to not use your phone or your computer, but I'm actually going to be asking you to use it. So feel free to keep that by the computer, or if you have two screens at your desk, you can always use a second screen as well. But there's going to be a little bit of work here for you to do in the next couple of minutes. So the workshop is about being crisis ready and really stopping to ask ourselves, are we crisis ready? And some of the things that I hear from companies and organizations about the barriers to being crisis ready is, oh my gosh, Amy, there are so many different types of crises. We can't possibly be ready for all of them. Well, that's correct. You can't, but that's why we don't try to prepare for every single crisis, right? There are 4 categories, generally speaking, where an event or a potential crisis or a real crisis affects people, our product or a service, property, you know, buildings, office buildings, storage units, processing facilities, or perception about our company and what we do, our organization and our industry. And that really speaks to the reputation. And everything that happens usually starts in one of these 4 categories and then spreads to the others. So you may have a product recall that focuses or starts with the product, but then depending on how you handle it, could affect your reputation or the perception of your organization. Or an HR issue that then spills over to affect your product because you don't have people to produce your product. And of course, the most recent example of that being COVID several years ago. So when I hear that, I say, you're absolutely right. There's no way we can prepare for every single possibility. The good news is we don't have to. We don't have to. The other thing that I hear is that Well, some issues just explode. Some issues are a slow kind of boil, if you will, and they never really reach a crisis stage. And then there's some issues that they start off in a boil and then they explode. They kind of have this crack and then explode, right? And they say there's no way of predicting how this is going to go. So we can't, there's no way to prepare for it. And again, I would say you don't have to know how each situation is going to play out in advance to be prepared to handle it. And we're going to be talking about how to do just that. What I do know is that being prepared saves you time, money, and goodwill or perception issues with not only the public but your customers. So there are no studies that I know of that say if you prepare for a crisis and you have a plan and you practice it, you're going to save X amount of time and X amount of dollars, right? Because every crisis is different, as we've just said, and every company, every organization, every industry is different. So while I can't put a dollar amount on, this is what I can say in my experience. Companies and organizations that I work with who have planned and have thought about how they would respond to a crisis, regardless of where it falls in those four categories. Generally, I spend half the time that I otherwise would helping them through the issue if they hadn't planned or prepared. So if you want to translate that into money, right? Folks like me get paid by the hour usually. And so you're saving half of what you could potentially be paying just in my fees. That's not lawyers' fees. That's not staff fees, any overtime you're paying, any other third-party consultants. So, I would strongly argue that while I can't put a number on it based on experience, being prepared and thinking in advance of how to handle a potential crisis will save you time, money, and ultimately protect your reputation. So well worth what you have to go through to do it. So let's talk about what that is. The first thing is that if you haven't already, it's worth sitting down with the folks at your company, organization, or in your industry to identify and prioritize different hazards as best you can. I don't want you to have to go out and spend $20,000 on a research study, right? We're going to do the equivalent of maybe a back of the envelope analysis, but who better to do that than you, because you know your industry, company, and association, whomever you work for, you know them best, and so do your colleagues. So get your colleagues together who really understand and think about what keeps you up at night. What scares you? When you sit down and come in the door and sit down at your desk, what are you saying? Oh, I really hope this doesn't happen today, right? Think about that first. Then, and of course, there are no shortages of potential issues, right? And I would say, I'm going to pause here for just a second and see if anybody wants to either unmute and share something that keeps them up at night, whether it's on this list or not. You can share. If you don't want to unmute and share, then maybe type it into the chat. And Tracy, don't know if I can see the chat. So maybe could you keep an eye on that for me?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to pause and ask that you share either in the chat or unmute what keeps you up at night. What are some of the issues that your organization and company may face or could face?
So we have someone that says aflatoxin.
Oh, yes, the eternal issue with our industry, right? I think that issue comes around at least once every year. That's a good one. And when I say comes around, I mean in the media with consumers and public perception. As an industry, I'm sure you are managing it all the time, working to manage it all the time. Anybody else? Okay, well, certainly, just in the last couple of years, we've had food safety issues that maybe your company didn't have, but you were affected by food safety issues that other companies in the supply chain had. So it doesn't have to be an issue that your company is implicated or your organization is directly implicated in. You may be affected tangentially, right? That it just happens to happen to somebody else in your supply chain, and now you are involved. You're getting questions. Your customers are asking you if you're having the same problem. So I would encourage you, when you brainstorm with your team on things that you might have to manage or might have to deal with, that you think not only of the things that your company might directly be involved in, but that you might be involved in secondarily, right? Worker accidents. I worked with a company where there was a very unfortunate worker accident. Everybody in the packing house had have cell phones with them. And unlike the days when an accident happened and you could contain it and you get other people out of the area and cordon it off, before management even knew about it, it was on the internet. And there were pictures of it and videos of this horrible accident on the internet, because everyone in the vicinity had cell phones. Cybersecurity breaches. This is becoming more and more common with food industries, and not just the big multinational food companies. I have worked in the last 8 months, I have worked with 2 wholesalers that I would characterize as small to medium size companies that have had their systems breached, and all of their customer data, their banking data, all of that breached. And they were contacted and asked for a ransom. Of course, you have to get the FBI involved. So this is happening. It's happening to not just large companies, it's happening to small and medium companies in the food industry. Employee and labor relations. I think I would probably characterize the worker relations that we all went through during COVID, part of that. Weather-related disasters, we can't help those, we can't prevent those, but we can think about how we respond. An environmental accident, right? That contaminates a nearby stream or contaminates a local water supply or the soil. And of course, you have those accidents that cause fires, explosions, things like that on your property. So there's no shortage of things to keep us up at night. Once you brainstorm, you and your team brainstorm, it doesn't, don't feel like you have to start stretching too far, right? You could probably just spend 10 or 15 minutes and come up with a pretty good list. And then plot them on a diagram similar to this, with the vertical red axis showing 1 through 10 and -1 through 10, the impact on your business or your organization or your industry if it does happen, an impact in terms of money, reputation, and your ability to continue to operate. And then on the horizontal, think about the likelihood of it happening. And then as a group, first of all, you want to look at that far right corner, anything that falls in the it is likely to happen, highly likely to happen, say 6 or 7 through 10, and is going to have a big impact 6 or 7 through 10 on the vertical, you want to really focus on those. You definitely want to be prepared for those. And then you take a look at the other sectors and figure, well, okay, maybe there's an issue that is, a -1 on the likely, very low on the impact. So we won't specifically prepare for that one. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how to prioritize what you're going to prepare for. The second thing is, and this is where those cell phones come into play, right? Or that other screen that you have, is to understand your exposure and public exposure specifically. So what I want you to do is Google your company or your association's name, and look at what you find, right? We did this exercise at the Congress and it was very interesting. There were folks that found web pages that they thought had been taken down and hadn't been, incorrect contact information, folks that didn't know their main reception line was posted in the yellow pages online. So you Google your company, and what you're going to do is fill in a first responder sheet that's on the next slide. You'll see it. And you're going to write down all the ways that someone can communicate with your company using the internet, everything that's available online. And I can tell you, this is an exercise I do with companies when I begin to work with them on putting a plan together. And they are often surprised at how many ways people can find their information. Sometimes I was working with a multinational corporation and actually found the CEO, who is in Belgium. I found his home phone number on the web, on the internet. So you will be surprised what you find. Phone numbers, emails. You may have all of your staff's emails on your website, or all of your sales people's emails and mobile numbers on the website. I'm not saying necessarily change that. I'm not saying take down those sales representatives' numbers or emails, because that's how you get new customers. What I'm saying is be aware of it, right? We want to be aware of every way that you and the folks who work at your company can be contacted. And then you're going to identify for each point, who is the contact person that needs to be aware of how to handle calls or inquiries using that method, okay? And then think about whether that person right today, right now, knows whether they're responsible for that. And if they got a phone call or an email inquiry, what would they do with it that, that was controversial or pointed to a bigger issue? So this is what the form looks like. And I'm sure you'll be receiving the slides to this presentation, and it's a very easy form and you can edit it the way you need to. But essentially what you're doing in the first column is identifying that contact point, the contact us form on your website. Send a test email to that. Most of the time when I send an email to those contact us form, either it goes into oblivion and is never replied to, it ends up being lost, nobody knows who reads those emails, or it's an error, it's been disconnected, and I get a mail delivery message, error message. The sales staff, anybody on your website, the online yellow pages, very common to be listed there. Sometimes the Better Business Bureau. If you have your shipping dock or your transportation logistics folks on your website, because many people want to have the logistic contact information so that truck drivers can get a hold of them. Well, if truck drivers can get a hold of you, reporters can get a hold of you. Again, I'm not saying take it off the website. I'm saying be aware that these are ways folks can get in touch with you if they want to during a particular crisis. Okay. Are there any questions about this process in particular? I don't see any hands going up or anything. Is there anything in the chat, Tracy?
No.
Okay. Everybody's got it. Well, we're going to have more time for Q&A at the end anyway. So if you think of something to ask, you can definitely do it later. Okay. So we're going to plan, right? And part of planning is identifying those hazards of most concern to us using the graph. Also, identifying all the ways that we can be contacted publicly, right? Because usually that's one of the first things that happens that throws us off. So we're starting there. And then we start to build the process by which we're going to respond to any crisis, right? It doesn't matter if it's property, people, perception, or product, right? Who will be contacted first to assess the situation? Prepare and practice. Let's go through that. So we did that first responder assessment. Then developing the response process, who does what, when, and how. And we start looking at that on that first responder assessment because we do identify the person who would be responsible and whether or not they're aware. But we haven't gone any further to say how they would prepare, how they would respond, right? Who are they going to ask? So if I'm assigned to monitor the contact us form and I get a report that something is wrong with either my product or my workers or consumers, whatever it is, then what do I do? What's the process that I follow? Who should I contact? What's the threshold that I should use to contact that person? And is it different if I get a contact us email or a phone call from a reporter than it is from a consumer, than it is from, let's say, a customer? Do I direct those complaints or those potential issues to different people or the same person? So we want to hash all that out, think about it. Then identify what happens next. What does that person do? What's the process? Who might they bring into the response team? What's the type of information that we may need to collect? And then how are we going to do that? And how are we going to prepare our people for that? Do we need capacity building? Do we need to identify some outside consultants, not to hire today, but to have on a resource list so we know who to call if we need to? Do we need to train people on taking those phone calls? If you get a phone call from a government agency claiming that we need to act right now today, rather than agreeing to everything, let's teach our folks what to do with that phone call and who to send it to, what not to say, as well as what to say. Sometimes training folks on what not to say is just as important. Those resource lists that I mentioned, any communication templates. With any crisis, there's usually a period of time in the beginning where you know something might be happening, but you're not sure what, you don't have a lot of facts, you're still trying to figure it out. And if you are contacted by a member, a customer, a reporter during that gray time, then what is going to determine, number one, if you respond, and number two, how you respond? And can we have a template with a general statement that helps us respond with essentially by saying nothing, but saying something, right? Updating those processes and having that written plan. You know, I hear this from folks: why have a written plan? Nobody ever follows it, or it's out of date the minute you write it. No, you know, it can't possibly be kept up to date. The benefit of a written plan, the greatest benefit, there are many benefits. The greatest benefit of a written plan is that it forces you to plan, the verb plan, not the noun, right? So it's important to have the noun, the physical plan, written plan, but in writing that, it forces you to go through the action of planning. And that's the greatest benefit. Okay. I highly recommend in your plan, it starts right off with a checklist of the immediate things you need to do, because when something happens or when you think it's going to happen, it will be hard initially to collect your thoughts. And if you can just go to a checklist, that'll get you started. And then you'll be responding to the specific situation after that. So far, all of the processes and procedures that I've talked about would be probably pretty much the same for any type of crisis, right? You probably have management and middle management that or a hierarchy of reporting, no matter what organization or company you're with, that you would probably use for just about any crisis. And the processes and procedures up till this point would probably be very much the same for any crisis. Now we get to the point where we take those 2 or 3 or whatever, however many issues that were in that upper right-hand corner, high probability and high impact on your organization or company. And we're going to develop key messages and support points for those issues. And this is the part where you get a little more granular into a specific issue. Everything else to this point, the process, the framework response, if you will, is pretty much the same for all of them. So you'll see in this last column, steps to making us get ready. You know, and here we have some ideas on how to train someone to answer those phones in case of a crisis, right? So you want to make sure that you're not just identifying the need, but then you have a plan to fill in and identify those gaps and fill those readiness gaps. Then once you have that, great, we've got all these, we know we need these templates, we know we need this list. Well, now you've got to actually go out and actually develop those resources, develop those lists, develop the tools. This is the action-oriented part of being prepared. The key here is to get more than one person involved. Sadly, most of the time, there's one person who's put in charge, and somebody says, go write a crisis plan, and that person is lucky if they can get that any more support than that from upper management. And then nobody sees the plan or talks about the planning until something happens. And then, you know, the poor person who spent all this time developing it says, well, we have those templates. And somebody says, well, I didn't know that. How come I didn't know that? And it becomes a big surprise to everyone except the one person who spent a lot of time and energy on it. And in my experience, getting buy-in from multiple people in your company to put the plan and to plan, the verb, will ensure that it is successful and that it's used in the future. The single best thing you can do to ensure you are ready is to practice. Nobody is ever good at anything if they don't practice, right? You wouldn't want your Super Bowl team to go out Super Bowl day having the first practice of the year, right? You want them to be well practiced, well rehearsed, to go over and over and over and know those plays. It's the same thing here. If you handled or managed crises every day, you wouldn't need to practice because you'd be doing it every day. But nobody wants that. You don't want to be good at handling actual crises because that means you're doing it all the time. You want to be good at practicing crises. So if it happens, you're ready, right? And what this allows you to do is identify your weaknesses, both in your plan and in your response. Sometimes through a practice session, you identify the plan isn't right. We need to change the plan. Other times you realize, no, the plan's right, our execution isn't right. And you have to be strategic about how you practice. My recommendation is don't try to practice the whole plan at once. Focus on a particular area that you think you're particularly weak in and see if you can get that down first, and then focus on other areas. Ideally, you come away with answers to what do we need to change, what do we need to improve, both in the plan and our response, and training gaps. More often than not, what companies and associations and organizations walk away with is the realization that if only we had some training, if only we trained these folks, we would be good. We'd be in good shape. Don't go it alone. Okay. Yes, prevention is great. As a matter of fact, prevention is paramount. But there's no such thing as zero risk. Things will happen, and acting quickly and effectively is the next best thing. Use your plan. If you spend the time and energy, not just you, but several people in your organization take the time and energy to develop a plan and to plan, go through the planning process, use it. It works. People are amazed when they use their plan, how well they can work. Make sure when you write your plan, when you prepare your plan, when you practice, that you include communication. Sometimes we focus just on the product or just on the people or the media, but there's a lot of other communication with employees, with customers, the media, of course, your social media, and you want to make sure all of that is included in there. I mentioned earlier that part training is partly helping people know what to say and what to do, but it's also about what not to say and what not to do, the do no harm rule, right? And just learn through the process. Make sure those practice sessions are for learning. If you're going to make any mistakes, any errors, you do it when you practice. And then you don't have to make those mistakes if you're ever confronted with an actual crisis. So don't go it alone. Who do you call? Well, you have trade associations, right? Not the least of which is the American Peanut Council. But I'm sure many of you may have regional trade associations or other national associations. There are subject matter experts, either in your organization or among the trade associations or at local universities. Depending on the issue, you might know of subject matter experts. Make a list in your plan of subject matter experts on those topics that are of particular concern to you. And lastly, your insurance policy may have resources for you. Many companies and even organizations don't realize that their even general liability policies can have a certain percentage of your premium set aside for what they call pre-incident funds. And if you call and ask your broker or your insurance company, ask if there are any pre-incident funds available to you for things like crisis planning, training, food safety training, and anything that, well, I should say, you have to check with your insurance to see what it covers. But in my experience, generally that money, that definition of pre-incident or pre-crisis activities is pretty broad. And as long as you can show them that what you are spending the money on will help you respond in a crisis, they're pretty lenient. I'm going to finish up here by talking a little bit about the American Peanut Council and how important all of this is to the council. First of all, it's a core competency of APC, right? We provide member services, such as webinars like this, but we're also available for a crisis response on behalf of the industry if or when things happen. The American Peanut Council acts as the primary industry spokesperson, and of course, in doing so, defends the industry reputation. We maintain a credibility for the industry so that when things happen, we can get out a credible message quickly. But that's not to say that we do it alone, right? The council also collaborates with other industry organizations. We work with FDA, USDA, other regulatory agencies, and of course, folks across the industry, including many subject matter experts. So certainly don't do it alone. It's in an inclusive and collaborative manner, but it is a core competency of the council. Just on a regular basis, many of you may receive the media reports, the regular weekly media reports. We're monitoring not only the media, but different issues all the time, anticipating issues. And there are many times where we see a potential issue come up in social media or online. We immediately develop talking points and Q&A, and nothing may happen. we just do it in case. And we have a lot of backgrounders and a lot of resources on various issues that never actually came up in the media, but we were ready if they did. And if they come up in the future, we'll be ready. And of course, the council has a crisis plan that is regularly updated. So I'm going to finish with peanuts, right? Do you get it? Peanuts? Yeah, okay, sorry. Look, I've been doing this a long time. I worked with a lot of companies. It is not a matter of if, but when something will happen. And if you're ready, if you have a plan, if you go through the planning process, you prepare, you practice, you remember that you don't have to go it alone, then you will come out tired, exhausted, but you'll come out of it on the other side and you can get through it. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm hoping we have time for questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was wonderful. I learned a lot, especially about the insurance resources. So thank you. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Amy? Well, if not, I believe you had your information on the screen, so they know how to get hold of you. And as I said, in a few days, we will have this up and posted on our website in the member section, as well as her slides. So if no one has any questions, we will end it here and let you get on with your days. But thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. And thank you again, Amy.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And please, oh, wait, I see a hand. Oh, no, that was clapping hand. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tracy, and of course to the American Peanut Council for giving me the opportunity. Always available, but more than anything, APC is a resource for you as well. And I'm always working with them. So if you call APC, you get a 2-for-1.
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.